The economy of the USSR was nuts. Karl Marx, who invented communism, just formulated the economic principles of socialism. Marx's economic model of socialism is often referred to as Marxian socialism or Marxist socialism. It emphasizes the need to overthrow the capitalist system through a revolution led by the working class, proletariat, and establish a socialist society. Marx's principles of socialism are about fairness and equality. He believed that everyone should share ownership of things, and there should be no rich or poor. Instead of working for profit, the economy should focus on meeting everyone's needs. Marx thought this would require a big change and that the working class should lead this transformation. The goal is to create a society where everyone is treated fairly and equally. In actuality, you cannot really come up with a practical solution to socialism. So Bolsheviks have to come up with their own economic model of socialism. People who made Bolshevik revolution were not economists. They knew how to destroy, but they didn't know how to create. Should they confiscate the property of capitalists and peasants, they didn't know what to do with it, so they started to experiment. And the results of the experiment were horrendous. Couple of examples of the crazy economy. Example 1. During my engineering studies in the Soviet Union, we had a mandatory subject called political economy. The first semester covered the political economy of capitalism, followed by the political economy of socialism in the second semester. Our professor of political economy also served as the president of the university sports club, and I was a member of the university wrestling team. I successfully completed the first semester, as the political economy of capitalism was relatively straightforward and logical. However, I eventually decided to quit wrestling because the training and competitions were taking up too much time, making it challenging to balance my studies. The professor approached me and assured me that if I returned for the next wrestling competition, he would make sure I faced no difficulties in his exam. Nevertheless, I decided to stay committed to quitting wrestling, as I believed I had already passed the capitalist economy exam and anticipated no issues with the socialist economy exam. Oh man, I was completely mistaken. The Soviet-style socialism just didn't make any sense to me. The idea of central planning was so impractical. Looking at the course materials, I realized it was all a bunch of nonsense. How could they plan everything that needed to be produced years in advance? What if something new was invented last week? No wonder there were shortages of everything, even good quality bread in some places in the USSR. The system of peasants being salaried workers without proper incentives was flawed. Their salaries were so low that they couldn't afford to buy enough food for their families, and they had to grow their own food in addition to their work on collective farms. Moreover, the complex money system with limitations on converting funds to cash was baffling. Companies could convert only a certain percentage to salaries. If you exceeded it, you can go to jail. It seemed like the course materials were filled with illogical statements and ideological propaganda. I couldn't handle all of this, so I decided to go back to my professor and let him know that I would continue wrestling for another semester instead. Example 2. I worked at the plant that manufactured regular and nuclear power station equipment. My job was to program CNC, computer numerical control, machines. One of the new designs had a very complex geometry. I told my boss that it would take 2 to 3 years to develop CNC programs for the design, and we needed to start production in 3 to 4 months. The solution was to use computers to generate the programs. We rented computing time at the local university and were able to finish the programming on time. We needed our own computers to handle future designs. Our plant sold equipment abroad, and we had US dollars, so my boss told me that I could buy an American computer. The trick was that when you buy equipment for US dollars, you also have to pay the equivalent in Soviet rubles. Basically, you are paying twice if you want to get foreign equipment. I did all the paperwork and went to the ministry in Moscow to get approval. When I arrived, I was informed that we had to order the required computers 3 years ahead. Can you believe it? Technology advances so quickly, and in 3 years, there will be new and better computers available. On top of that, if a computer with the same specifications is made in one of the communist countries, we are forced to purchase that instead. Even if we have US dollars to buy an American-made computer, we're stuck with a subpar East German or Bulgarian computer, which is far inferior in technical capabilities and quality. It's frustrating dealing with these restrictions from the Soviet Union. So, I won't be getting an American computer after all. My manager suggested a way around the situation by bribing officials. However, to do that, I would have to provide fake bonuses to my employees. The thought of bribery and fake bonuses could land me in a Soviet prison for 6 or more years. Given the risks involved, I've decided to opt for a Bulgarian computer instead. Example 3. My computer finally arrived, and it came with a printer that required special paper. However, I was informed by the purchasing department that the paper needed to be ordered a year in advance. It seemed quite impractical. In a stroke of luck, we found a catalogue of paper plants that manufacture computer paper. We noticed that each paper plant has a power station, and these power stations most likely need spare parts that our plant manufactures. But there's a catch: they also need to order these parts 1 to 3 years ahead of time. In a rather unconventional move, we contacted their purchasing department and proposed a barter arrangement. We offered them the spare parts they needed in exchange for computer paper. To ensure things went smoothly, I brought a bottle of brandy to the person in charge on the shop floor. He agreed to make extra parts for us, and we sold these parts to the paper plant. In return, they supplied us with the much-needed computer paper. Our actions were in violation of the law, and if the KGB targeted you, they could arrest and convict you for it at any time. However, it was a solution born out of necessity and the difficulties posed by the system. In general, any manager who has been in their position for a year or more could face a minimum of 4 years in a Soviet prison, since they would unavoidably violate Soviet laws due to the circumstances. Other examples. There was a quote for cutting the cost of materials. As a result of that, designers were compelled to create parts that consumed an excessive amount of materials to meet the quota of cutting the cost of material in the future. Manufacturers of pots and pans were given production quotas based on weight, leading them to focus on producing as many large and heavy pots and pans as possible. This is why finding small frying pans in a store was practically impossible. During my business trip to Siberia, Tyumen, the city known as the center of the Soviet oil industry, I encountered significant challenges. The food store shelves were nearly empty, and buying basic items like meat and sugar required special coupons exclusive to locals. Moreover, the hotel costs exceeded the maximum allowance provided, and the high food prices caused my food expenses to surpass the limit as well. As a result, I found myself covering the costs of the hotel, food, and other expenses out of my own pocket. Just because you obtain permission to receive materials and parts from another plant doesn't guarantee that you'll receive them on time. Quotas must be met by the end of the quarter or year. If you require bolts to meet your own quota, you may have to travel to the plant that manufactures the bolts, and potentially offer a bribe to ensure timely delivery for your plant to fulfill its quota. Once again, bribe is against the law.